Um, Hi there, I'm Kieran, and this is Dr. Ashby, the Director of Studies for Economics at Downing. Um, and we're just gonna ask a few questions. I'm gonna ask him a few questions about the interview process at Downing.
Thanks, Kieran. Yeah. So yeah, the whole purpose of this is hopefully you can take yourself back to this time last year and think about anything that you would have liked to have been able to ask me. And hopefully that will be helpful for people that will be interviewed soon. The interviews themselves, the format is depending a little bit on the year, but it's about half an hour, give or take, uh, for the interview. And there's usually two interviewers. So it'll be me and someone else. And we generally take it in turns to ask questions, particularly on Zoom. So one of us will go on mute and then hand over, there'll be a handover to the person that was on mute about halfway through. And you may not know, or people may not know the answer to the things they're asked straight away, and that's absolutely fine and normal. Part of the purpose of it is to see how people can cope with unfamiliar material.
Right. Um, so will the questions in the interview be mainly based on what I write in my personal statement, or will you give me new unseen material?
So most of the questions normally are not based on the personal statement. They're based on something unseen, although there's usually a bit about the personal statement as well.
Um, will the interview be mainly A-level material, or should I expect stuff that I haven't come across in any of my A-level courses?
So in general, so in terms of A-level material, the only A-level that's required for economics is A-level maths. So there's no expectation that people would know things from A-level economics. And the short answer is no, not really. It's going to be quite different because economics as a degree is quite different from economics as an A-level. Economics as an A-level is great if you want to be able to read the FT or the Economist and understand it. But academic papers are quite different to that, and that's kind of what the degree is aiming to prepare people for. So it would be quite different, but the kind of A-level maths is kind of probably the most useful thing. Um, and yeah, if there is any maths involved, it would be at that level. And specifically, it would be things that are on the syllabus for the test of mathematics for university admissions.
In the interview, what is the best strategy when stuck on a question?
So if you do get a bit stuck, so it's completely expected that someone wouldn't know the answer straight away. It's not like there's no expectation people should know the answer to things off the top of their head or get it instantly. So firstly is that don't panic if you don't know the answer. Uh, I think the best thing would be just to take, a brief pause to think about it and reflect on it, and then just try with what you think is most likely to be right. Even if you think it's very unlikely to be right, just pick the thing that you think is least likely to be wrong. Because ultimately we will jump in, whoever is leading that part of the interview will jump in with help and prompts. And yeah, part of it is we want to see how well people are going to respond to those prompts and how effectively they can sort of maybe not learn but pick up new things. Um, but it's much easier to guide someone once you kind of know what they're thinking. So definitely say something. And if you are thinking it through, it's completely fine to think it out loud. And in fact, that would be best because we're not mind readers, so it's easier if it's done out loud. So basically, have a try is the best thing, and I'm saying with supervision work here, and it's much better to try it and get it wrong than to completely go silent or not say or write anything at all. Because then, as an interviewer, I've got nothing to work with.
Yeah. So if I'm stuck on a question, would you rather I try work through it myself, or should I look to ask for help?
I think you should look. I think I've sort of covered that, but yeah, definitely work for it yourself. I'm most interested to see what candidate is thinking. And I think that's quite, again, if we just sort of step back and think of the aim, the aim of this is to the aim of the whole admissions process is to evaluate someone as a potential undergraduate. And at the end of the year, the undergraduates have to sit exams in which they have to be able to solve problems on their own. So by all means, supervisors are there to give help and guidance. But the end goal is for people to be able to do it unaided. So I think what you really want in a student is that they're going to give it a go and see how they get on, and then be responsive to any help that's given. With someone that kind of passively asks for help all the time is probably not going to do very well in their degree here. And just on the giving help, actually, one thing I would like to make very clear is that there is no, there's not going to be any kind of traps. So if the interviewer gives some help, there is, it's going to be useful. It's not, they're not going to try and mislead you. Yeah. So there's no trick questions, no traps. Any help is very much genuine.
Will asking for help significantly lower my chance of getting in?
No, I mean, if you get really stuck, like it happens. I think if someone's asking for help all the time, then that's going to be a bit tricky. But no, but I would really encourage people to have a go first.
Yeah. What are you looking for from a candidate?
So like I said, we're trying to work out, and not just from the interview, like obviously from the whole paper application, from the pre-interview test score as well. We're trying to evaluate someone as a potential undergraduate. And the best undergraduate students can both solve the sorts of problems that they're presented with, and they can understand economically what's going on. So in a sort of intuitive way, they can explain the mechanisms at play and how the final result kind of translates into something a bit more tangible in the real world than some algebra. So if there are problems to solve, then definitely someone that can solve them correctly. And most students at Cambridge can solve most of the problems correctly. The bit that is rarer and the bit that will set apart the people who do very well in their degree and the people who say just but do well is that they can understand intuitively and economically and explain what's going on. So if anyone can do both of those, that would be a really, really good sign. Because that's a relatively rare combination. And those sorts of people are the ones that are likely to get the first. So that would put them in about the top 20% of the people that are here, so they actually get in. So yeah, basically someone that's going to be a good undergraduate. And the other thing actually, I guess there's this is a little bit difficult to get in an interview, but in terms of a good undergraduate, then it's not just about there's an element of ability and people who are going to work hard and really throw themselves into it as well, apart from just kind of raw ability.
What equipment do you need to have around you while you do the interview?
So just a pen and paper. So that should go out on the interview invitations. So we typically are thinking through problems, even if they're not actually being solved. So it may not be an algebraic problem, but it might be slightly more conceptual than that. And that often means there's a bit of information that we need to give people. And it's helpful if they have a pen and paper to write that down.
So there's no need for a calculator then?
No, definitely don't need a calculator or anything else. And definitely don't need a sort of iPad or tablet or anything like that. If people have them and they want to connect them, that's fine. But it's not required because actually when people, and sometimes people choose to illustrate their answer with a graph, which if you're not asked to do that, you're not expected to do it. And they just hold it up to the webcam and actually that works fine. So anything other than a pen and paper is not really needed.
Yeah. So then how would you what would you say is the best strategy for spending the morning before your interview?
That's a good question. I guess that's going to depend a bit on the individuals.
Mm,
Um, I guess if you have an afternoon exam, it's going to be something a bit similar, really.
yeah,
Probably less like last minute cramming because there's nothing to cram for. There's no expectation that you're going to know like in an exam, you might just be asked to write down some formula or definition, and that's not going to happen. So I would suggest trying to relax. You might want to just have another read over your personal statement. Um, there's some expectation that you kind of know what you've written and that you know about the things you've written about as well. Not in sort of great specific detail. So if you said you've read a book, I'm not going to get the book off the bookshelf and say, tell me what happens in chapter 10. But some kind of idea of, well, what was the main thing I took away from this? Or what did I find most interesting about it? I think that's sort of quite a fair thing to expect. So just a refresher of that. But I wouldn't be trying to prepare too hard or getting. I think I'd probably just try and relax and forget about the fact I had an interview coming up. What did you do? And would you
uh,
recommend it?
well, yeah. I read over my so I think my interview was around midday.
Hmm.
I took the morning off school. Um, I read over my personal statement loads of times, and kind of like got in my own head a bit. So if I was to do it again, I'd definitely like just as soon as I wake up and just distract myself, like go on a walk or something, not just sit on my desk in like anticipation, because I think that got me very nervous.
Yeah, I was back in the days of in-person interviews, and I think I just paced around Cambridge all day, which wasn't
Yeah,
particularly helpful either. I ended up just working myself up, but yeah,
yeah. So I would have I'd distract myself in the morning if I had to do it again. If
yeah.
that
I think try and try and take your mind off it a bit. Um, I mean, we do our best. Like interviews are inherently intimidating things to do. I
makes
think that's kind of a universal experience of them. You'll have interviews later in life, like for job applications and things. I think everyone gets a bit nervous before them. We will very much do our best to try and make it not scary and to try and put people at their ease.
yeah.
So I would say don't try to worry too much about it, but that's going to be a lot easier said than done.
It was definitely a lot more relaxed than I anticipated when
Good,
doing the interview. I expected it to be very daunting, but it was genuinely just a chat between about economics. So
good. No, that's exactly what we want to hear because we do try. Like I said, there are limits to how much you can actually help someone relax in an interview setting, but
yeah,
um, I mean, ultimately, we just want to see people at their best because we're trying to see their kind of potential as a student. And someone being really stressed out is not going to be at their best. So it's
yeah,
not conducive to a good interview.
cool. Well, that's all the questions that I have.
Right.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much, Kieran.
Thank you.